Great. So good morning and welcome to our seminar on the evolution of the marketing operating model. And it's looking like we're going to have a great turnout this morning. So our plan is for the next 45 minutes, we're going to walk you through the top line findings of our report. We won't get through all of the content in the report. It's a really wonderful, meaty read. We will leave a QR code at the end of the presentation for you to download. And I'd really suggest that you download it because there's a lot of advice and guidance from other marketers who have been through transformations or been through changes, and there's a lot of advice and guidance for you. We won't be able to cover all of that today, but today we're going to talk through some of the top line findings. What I would love to invite you to do is you should be able to see a Q&A box in your panel at the bottom. If you want to leave any questions, what we're going to try and do is leave 15 minutes at the end so that we can pick up some questions and answer those. But again, if we don't get around to answering all of your questions, really feel free to get in touch with either myself or Robin at AAR, and we're very happy to do follow-up sessions and one-on-ones. So, hi, I'm Victoria Fox. I'm CEO of AAR, and I'm hosting this morning's webinar with my colleague, Robin Charney, who is a partner at AAR.
Hello.
So, hello, Robin. I just wanted to very quickly talk about who AAR are. For those that don't know, we are consultants to the marketing industry, and we're a team of experts who get very excited about getting under the bonnet of a marketing operating model to elevate all the elements that stop great strategy from turning into great results. So we consult across people, partners, process and platforms. I have been in the industry, I know I don't look old enough, for over 30 years now, and I can honestly say that I can't recall a time when there's been so much complexity and so much change in the market. And every conversation I have with the marketing leader, especially over the last 12 months, has really uncovered the same tension, that the role of the CMO or the senior marketer has never been broader, and that the pressure to deliver has never been greater. I'm sure you reflect some of that back into your own organizations. And the truth is that data and technology has really transformed the way that marketing is delivered and actually how marketing is justified in the boardroom. There's just an enormous pressure on marketers to deliver on so many different levels. And the truth is you can't afford for situations where your strategy is hampered or undeliverable due to operational issues. And as a result, the importance of the marketing operating model, or as we refer to it, the how of marketing, it's never been as important, and it's equally important now to the what of marketing. They are the yin and yang of the marketeer's role, and that means ensuring seamless integration of your people, your partners, your processes and your platforms becomes just as crucial as the strategy, creative and execution that we all got into the business to deliver. But what we're told time and time again is that marketers don't have the time, the resources, or sometimes the skills to really focus on and develop and build, optimize effective op models. Which is why we really launched this piece of research and launched the report, because we hear time and time again that our clients want help and guidance and support and are hungry for that support on this very specialist topic. So getting into the meat of it, just to recap what we think a marketing operating model is. Robin, do you mind clicking on? So a marketing operating model, what is it? Most of us have possibly never heard of it. So let's just define what we mean by a marketing operating model. It's how your organization is structured, governed and operates to achieve strategic goals. It's the sum total of how marketing gets delivered. At its core, a well-designed marketing operating model bridges strategy and execution and brings together the four key pillars that I've mentioned. So people, partners, processes and platforms. It ensures that marketing is effective and efficient, We can't just be efficient, although I'm sure there's lots of people being driven for efficiencies right now in this economic climate, but we have to focus on being effective and efficient. Otherwise, we might as well pack up and not deliver some of the marketing we're doing. It ensures your people have the right capabilities within the right structures. It ensures that your partners are delivering effectively with clear roles and responsibilities, and that processes are clear and that they're universally adopted so that we stop some of the chaos. And that platforms that we're all being asked to use are seamlessly embedded and being used well. And then if I just move on to just unpacking, I'm not going to go into detail, but across the 4 pillars, the types of things that are considered in the 4 Ps. So across people, it's thinking about your organizational design, the skills that you're going to need within the department, evolving those skills, and how are you set up for success? How do you balance in some organizations what's centralized, what's decentralized, and what are the core competencies that are needed, plus how do you cross-functionally collaborate now, because increasingly we're having to collaborate across multiple disciplines within an organization. And then on the partner side, it's about choosing the right partners, obviously, but then making sure that the model within that is a really clear way of collaborating between agencies and also increasingly in-house agency resource. Building an agency model where it's really clear who has what role and what responsibility, and balancing that internal and external resource to drive accountability. And also there's a big chunk of that which is around remuneration models. On processes, increasingly it's about delivering and defining ways of working and governance to align strategy to outcomes. AI, the word that's never far from our lips at the moment, really requires a real tight look at processes so that we can actually unlock the potential in AI as well. So there's a big amount of work going on in the process area. And then platforms. This covers marketing technologies and tools that are going to enable seamless workflow, data integration, campaign optimization. So all the things that allow us to get rid of some of the duplication, but also make sure things are efficient and effective across the department, but also enabling some of the tests that are going on around generative AI to really deliver outcomes. So on to the report. I'm not going to go through this word for word, so feel free to read as I'm talking, but the report, which we interviewed over 100 CMOs and deep dive interviews with 10 of those CMOs. And what we found, these are, before we get into the 4 Ps, because that's how the report is structured, we're going to go through the 4 Ps individually and the key findings. There were some overall findings that are just worth pulling out. Over half of the marketeers we interviewed don't believe their operating model is high performing. That's quite a big statement, to have over half believing it's not high performing. We're seeing an enormous emerging fast the marketing operating function within a department, with over 36% interviewed introducing one in the last 12 months. But what we're seeing is that there needs to be more data to enable decisions to be made from data so that they're more effective as departments. In housing was a massive topic that came out of the research. As many setting up in-house functions as there are those that are sending it back out the other way. So something is going on there. And it's our belief that if the only reason you're setting up in-house functions is because you're trying to drive down costs, then the likelihood is in the mid to longer term, it might well be that you find that that's not working and it goes back out. Whereas those that set a vision for wanting to bring in an in-house function because they want to make better work and they can really see that that can work within their organization, they set it up with that in the right way, and therefore they stick. So we're seeing as much coming in as going out because there's a whole big topic around in housing. One of the other findings was about the fact that we have two models effectively working alongside each other. There's the traditional linear workflow, campaign driven workflow alongside the always on, and there's a really important need to look at those two things and work out how they can work seamlessly alongside each other in one department. half of the people we interviewed were talking about the fact that they were doing GenAI tests, which actually I think sounds quite low now, but we have to remember that some of this research was completed at the end of 2024, and I would say that number will have gone up quite substantially by now. So there's over half trialing GenAI, and the truth is that will impact all of the 4Ps over time. So a big topic to consider. And then over half of the respondents are saying that one of the biggest things they want to tackle this year, and one of the biggest challenges, is how to get creative and media working more seamlessly together. That's all about both efficiency and effectiveness, but that's something that's coming up loud and clear through the research. And then finally, one of the overall findings is that 41% believe that their agency roster is not fit for purpose. So there's big change in the agency model world from what we're seeing in this research. What's also coming through is just how quickly the role of the CMO, and I use the term CMO broadly, senior marketers, how much that is changing, that there is a very complex role emerging. There's more pressure than ever to deliver short-term results. And there is this ever increasing gap between the capabilities that are needed in a team and what we're seeing. And that is being highlighted throughout the report. And one of the things that comes out is that marketing almost needs to get its pointy elbows out. There's a need for marketing to actually market itself as a discipline within the organization, to stop other disciplines taking off parts of the remit. We're hearing it all the time. It does need to be cross-functional, but there is a need for the CMO to really own the marketing space in the boardroom. And we asked, just quickly on the next chart, Robin, we asked for respondents to score how concerned they were about a range of issues. And I think what's most notable about this chart is not necessarily if you go through them one by one, but actually just how close all the scoring was. Because what's happening is CMOs feel that they are facing multiple simultaneous challenges. Concerns around the evolution of the operating model come forth, although it's very close to the top three. And that shows just how important it is to get the marketing operating model working really well to deal with the many disparate challenges the marketers are facing. So I'm going to pass over to Robin now, and we're going to jump into the different Ps. That sounds wrong.
Thank you, Victoria. Yes, we're going to talk about our 4 Ps, which is quickly becoming a shorthand for us. So in the report, we looked at people, partners, process, and platforms. I'm going to quickly take you through top line findings from each of those. And as I'm talking through these, please feel free to pop some questions in the Q&A box if there are things that come up and you want a little bit more detail on or some clarification on. But essentially, we strongly believe that an operating model is made up of these 4 components, and people being the underlying kind of foundation of any operating model. And I guess what's slightly startling there is that almost 70% of CMOs think that there are gaps in the skills of the marketeers to kind of face into the future. And we're seeing a big discrepancy between kind of what we call traditional skills and more kind of modern marketing skills. But sadly, only 50% of CMOs have marketing capability, resource, or budget. So while CMOs are acknowledging that there are challenges with the skills their marketeers have and the skills they need to build, only half have the ability to kind of do something about it in some way. And what's also interesting is that almost 50% have restructured their teams. And again, I think that's probably low given what we've heard in the news recently. So what we do see is that 50% restructured last year, 30% to restructure it this year. And it just feels from talking to lots of clients that restructuring and rearranging is definitely a kind of always on function these days. There doesn't seem to be a pause in people not rearranging the marketing team. And that leads to, sadly, 50% of people saying that, keeping teams motivated and keeping people kind of focused on the day-to-day is quite a challenge because of this constant pace of change. It's quite relentless, and what people are finding is that it's leading to quite a lot of, I guess, mental exhaustion. So In addition to that, we also saw, again, as Victoria mentioned earlier, that GenAI has an impact on every P. So GenAI from the people perspective is certainly seen as a significant opportunity. The positive view is that it'll improve operational efficiency and it'll really have an impact on content production and kind of automating all the jobs that perhaps we're not so excited about doing. But almost everyone in the report said that GenAI is going to radically reshape marketing teams, with almost a little over 50% saying they had already implemented GenAI trials. So no matter what, GenAI is going to change. We're not quite sure what it's going to change yet, but 100% almost agree it's going to change something. And that leads to the need for marketeers to really start to understand the technology and get adept at using it. And more importantly, evolving processes to incorporate AI and automation. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in our process section. So Victoria mentioned this earlier. What we did observe in the research is this kind of evolution of this two-speed operating model. So we have an operating model for the kind of more traditional branding campaigns that take longer, might take a few months to really implement those long ideas. But counter to that, we also have this always-on content model. So I think a recognition that there are two speeds that most teams have to operate at, and planning from a capacity and a people point of view about what skills you need for each, because they might not be the same. So the first step there is really acknowledging that there are at least two operating models within most teams in terms of how the work gets done. So finally, in this section, just some very, very quick takeaways. It's all detailed in the report, but essentially, our advice would be look at that skills gap between what we see as traditional skills and more modern marketing skills, invest in training and upskilling, and really start to think about how AI is going to impact your skills requirements. There's a big section in the report around the different types of organizational design, but our advice here is that your org design, no matter how often you redraw it, needs to really fit the business context. So whether you're product led, whether you are channel led, et cetera, it's really making sure that marketing aligns to business strategy, and that's kind of one of our golden rules at AAR, is that marketing must align to business strategy. Think about how you blend that specialist expertise of those foundational marketing skills around customer insight and brand strategy around more of those T-shaped and M-shaped marketeers who combine that deep expertise with broader adaptability. It really is important to have the right balance of skills and think about what the balance of skills is that your team needs in particular. Sadly, we're always asked for, what's the one size fits all? What's the bullet? What's the magic answer? And there rarely is one, unfortunately. Think about those dual speed marketing operating models as we talked about, and think about how your people are feeling, and think about the level of exhaustion that so many teams are experiencing when it comes to a constant adrenaline rush of always on change. And as the news shows us this week and pretty much every week, it feels like change is the BAU for marketing now. So how do you foster that culture of psychological safety so that people can perform at their best regardless of the change situation? So if I was going to have like two words, if you think of nothing else, two words to think about in people, it's upskill and fortify. If you think about those two words, that's kind of how I think about the people pillar. Going on to the next one, which is partners. So partners is all about your agency operating model. So many of the people in this survey talked about the coming together of media and creative. It seems to be a trend. So many pitches that we run these days are looking to kind of right size the creative and media teams. So a lot of this is again being driven by the need for greater efficiencies, but I also think it's being driven by the need for simplification. So developing, whether it be in-house or through your agencies, developing that media and creative synergy is really something that is kind of top of mind for many marketeers. And many are talking about how they look at their agency model over the last 12 months. So over the next 12 months. The challenge of media and creative not working effectively together comes top, as we start saying, but really this idea of what you're bringing in-house and what you're leaving with agencies is a kind of another kind of whole area of thinking, because it does require some thought. If you think about the people bit being about what capabilities your marketing team require, then you can look at your agency ecosystem as a bit of a geography question. What do we sit in-house, and what is our in-house team really brilliant at, and what are our agency partners really brilliant at, and getting that balance right. And it will shift over time, but that's certainly a way of thinking about how you kind of operationalize the requirements you need from in-house and external partners. So what are the key priorities in the partner section for the next 12 months? Simplification, simplification, simplification. Really, there's a need to look at your agency model from a cost, but also cost efficiencies, but also an effectiveness point of view. So greater simplification, media and creative need to combine as seamlessly as they can. Lots of people told us that there's a huge importance on upper funnel brand marketing to integrate smoothly with lower funnel performance. So again, it's our industry loves to talk about either or, and I don't agree with Ritson on much, but I definitely agree on the idea of bothism that he talks about a lot. We have to consider both the upper and the lower funnel when we're looking at the marketing as a whole. And really, the fourth area is this thing around assets at scale and on automation. So how do we create assets to be created and reused efficiently through the funnel, particularly as AI automates delivery at scale? So these are just four kind of key priorities that marketeers told us are really on their mind as we look at the next 12 months. So in this area, what I would say is, from a kind of two-word takeaway point of view, I would say to think about simplification and clarification of the roles of your agencies in the widest sense of the word, be it internal or external. So that comes back to the point around striking the right balance between in-house and external resources. Make it flexible, make it tiered, revisit it a lot because it does change as time marches on. Think about how you prioritize agility and control and efficiency in resourcing. So what goes where? Really try to look at the collaboration between your media and creative partners, whether that be in-house or external, and try to figure out what the right model is for you there in terms of the thinking and the integration of the thinking. Keep looking at GenAI to scale content and capability and reduce costs. GenAI and automation are only going to work for you if you've got the next P, the process P, kind of lined up. So you really got to think about how you get ready for GenAI and automation through both your agency lens, but also your process lens, which I'll talk about in a second. And finally, design the partner ecosystem as a future-ready operating model. So again, in the last section, we talked a little bit about operating models for always-on content versus long-form ideas. Your agencies and your in-house agency is also a little operating model in of itself and how it works together. Our third P, and I'm racing through this because I want to make sure we leave time for questions. In the process P, we really want to talk about getting ready and getting your house in order. This is probably, it didn't used to be, this is probably my favorite area now. I used to be a reluctant process queen, but as the pace of the world has descended upon all of us, I find that helping clients look at designing the right processes for their operating model is a kind of beautiful constraint. It frees you. It will give you some peace of mind. It'll give you some structure. It'll maybe dull down the chaos a little bit and kind of let you do the work you want to do without being endlessly bogged down in small little kind of battles here and there. So that's why almost 50% of CMOs have introduced new ways of working in governance in the last year. And again, I'm sure that's an ongoing task. What makes me happy is that almost all organizations we talk to and surveyed have some kind of marketing ops function. And marketing ops to me are they're the engineers within marketing, and they're the people who really make, air traffic control, make sure the runway's clear, make sure the flights are all in the right order, make sure everything's running on time, and they do kind of bring a little bit of sanity to the world. And of those businesses that have introduced marketing ops functions, little over 35% have introduced them in the last 12 months. So it's an ongoing kind of new area of skill, and perhaps not many people have been aware of the marketing ops function in the past, but it's definitely a really growing area as the complexity of marketing increases. And I think it's something that pretty much no matter how small you are, every marketing team needs a marketing operations function. It can be small, it could be one person, it could be half of a person, but you need somebody who's there to look after the how of marketing. There are lots of marketeers who are brilliant at the what and the strategy and the planning and and the campaigns, but you need some brains thinking about how it's all going to get done, or else again it will not end well. So some of the highlights from our research in this area were questions like, how can I encourage my team to focus on delivering outcomes? So excuse me, we talk a lot about outcomes in marketing versus outputs, and again, that's a big shift from lots of marketing departments, and to really start to think about what outcomes do we want to focus on and deliver as a team versus outputs, which is, it's not just about 1,000 briefs a year, or 5,000 assets, or 25,000 likes. You want to get to a point where you can drive some business outcomes, which is, we acquired this many, we the customer satisfaction went out this way, we got this kind of thing. So I think that's a big mental shift for a lot of marketeers. We also talked about what techniques can I deploy to identify and eliminate process bottlenecks and improve overall efficiency. So again, this is one of the ones where those engineers in marketing need to really sit down and look at processes end to end and figure out where the roadblocks are, and figure out what's stopping you doing your best work and delivering those outcomes, and address them. It's a detailed oriented process, but one that does need to be kind of thought about, because otherwise you'll just keep hitting the same walls. Thirdly, automation. Where can automation really help? Where can it not? So can you automate lead scoring, for example? Can you automate asset selection in the DAM, because you have a certain amount of assets that fit in one category? What can you start to automate to make your life simpler as a marketeer, and therefore free you up to spend more time on the things that you really need to focus on more deeply? And lastly, how can I set up this marketing operations team to ensure real success? And how can I make them, not the people who just say no, or not the people who want to slow things down, but the people who can help you slow down to speed up? So that's something to think about in that area. Key takeaways, again, if I was going to give you my 2 words for process, my 2 words would be build and embed. And that embed bit is really important, because you can have all the beautiful playbooks and processes you want written down. If no one follows them, then you're in a lot more trouble than you think. So embedding and training and getting people on the bus and making it a common goal, not another roadblock, is really important. So key takeaways in this area, I would say, are, outcomes over outputs. Really start to stop. I know it's hard, because it's so easy to just think about more and more and more, but what do we really want to drive? What's really important to the business, and what outcome do we want to support? Streamline those dependencies, so minimize those bottlenecks. Think about what's going to derail you. Think about what's going to go wrong potentially, and try to get ahead of that. That'll really help. Also implement those workflows, like mapping a rapid and looking ahead, looking around the corners. I would say sometimes will help you again slow down to speed up. Leverage automation. Think about what high volume tasks you can start to automate from a process point of view. But more importantly, design all your processes for collaboration and scalability. Whatever you design should be about how we get people working better together, and also how do we scale those processes. And finally, as with every one of our P's, prepare for an AI-powered future. So think about what AI is going to let you unleash. But I guess my note of caution here would be, without some processes already in place, without those processes embedded and kind of incorporated into the soul of your marketing team, AI is not going to help you unleash a powerful future, because you've got to have some processes in place really to take the best advantage of AI. So that's our process one. Our last P, our platforms P, is all about the survey was very much about AI. So, you can't move for talking about this topic at the moment. So almost everyone agreed that AI is going to radically reshape marketing teams. How? How is the big question. But we do have a little bit of insight in that already, over 85% of respondents said it's already changed about what they look for in their partners. So how they look at agencies, what they might be thinking in terms of what the agency's remit might be. I think that's a very high figure already. 85% already said that it has an impact on the roles they're hiring for. So again, what skills are you documenting on your CVs, and how are you kind of showing that you kind of can make the most out of AI in your personal career? Similarly, almost 85% agreed that there's going to be a need for upskilling, and yet we have that statistic back at the beginning that only 50% of teams have people thinking about marketing capability. So how's that going to play out? Is it going to be a kind of every woman and man for himself in terms of what you learn, and how are marketing leaders going to really help shape that AI kind of upskilling requirement? It's not even an opportunity. People are going to have to understand how to work with this technology. This one shocked me, the 60% reducing headcount. I found that one quite shocking already. But it'd be interesting to dig into that more in next year's report, looking at what particular roles are already being affected. And if anyone's got some insight on that, please pop it in the Q&A. I'd love to hear more. And again, back to that point about training and upskilling, almost 50% listed GenAI as the top requirement for training in their marketing team. So there's going to be lots of opportunity to help people, get ahead with AI. MarTech. So again, this is one of those ones where it's a everyone's seen the charts with 10,000 pieces of MarTech that marketing teams can buy. So we asked a question about MarTech, and we asked, thinking about data and MarTech on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you agree or disagree with the following statement? So we have the right MarTech. Almost 50% agree that they have the right tools and that they're using it well, and that's always the most important bit. Like, how many people? And it also says that almost the other 50% might not agree that they're using it well. They're streamlining investments. That makes sense. A lot of them say a lack of the right skill set limits us from delivering valuable insights. So again, almost 60% say that they don't have the right skill set to take advantage of the MarTech. This one's my favorite. We have lots of data, but we don't know what to do with it. I think that's pretty much everyone on this planet these days. 68% there say agree or somewhat agree that they have lots of data. And we hear this time and time again. Insight is the real unlocker when it comes to MarTech or any part of marketing these days that's data-driven. No one seems to be missing much data anymore. It seems to be really about what insights can we derive from the data that will help us, drive better outcomes for marketing. And finally, it's becoming increasingly hard to retain the right people in data roles as ever. This is a perennial challenge of data literate marketeers, back to that upskilling challenge listed earlier on. So one final slide here. 68% of CMOs agree they struggle to get the value from their MarTech investments. 72% said they lack skill sets, and 62% agree that it's increasingly hard to retain those data roles, as we just discussed. So the headlines for platforms, I guess my 2 words in platforms, this is becoming my little signature now. My 2 words here would be connect and scale. Whenever we work with clients and whenever we talk to marketeers, no one seems to need a lot more kit. What we need to do is connect our kit to each other better and really start to scale. That's especially true with GenAI. Everyone's playing around the edges of GenAI at the moment, but very few are scaling it to the point where it's becoming I guess a game changer as yet. I'm sure that will happen though. So the key takeaways in platforms will be extract the value from MarTech. So maybe you don't need more kit, maybe you just need to connect it better. Adopt the ROI framework. I didn't talk about this, but it's very detailed and it's in the report. So, use the framework of resourcing, objectives, and infrastructure to evaluate your MarTech decisions. So how does it affect our people? How does it affect our outcomes? And what infrastructure? How much do we need to change in order to adopt something new? Leverage GenAI. So as we keep saying, it will reshape marketing, but how is it going to work best for you is it's a very individual decision for marketing teams. Embrace that data integration. So prioritize first-party data, and AI readiness. So systems to create a single source of truth, enable real-time insights. It'll helpfully get to this nirvana of enhanced personalization, and all the time keeping an eye on compliance and privacy regulations. And finally, avoid over-investing in unproven technologies. So this is a real interesting one at the moment, as we're in what I would call the wild west of GenAI technologies. Nobody knows who's going to win here with a marketing lens. Nobody knows which technology is going, is it going to be an Adobe Firefly or a Pencil AI or anything else that might be coming onto the market tomorrow. So we're in this kind of wild west. So be mindful of that. Lots of people are creating technologies that will look amazing, but there will be a consolidation period. So I don't have the answer for you. If I did, I'd be investing in that technology. But I think there's a moment of just being mindful of where you put your eggs from a GenAI point of view, and it might just be a Goldilocks zone of trying a few, but who's going to win at this point? I don't think anybody knows right now. So those are the 4 Ps very quickly. Hopefully you'll have some questions as we move into the Q&A phase. Back to you, Victoria.
Well, Robin, yeah, we do have quite a few questions, so I won't take up too much time, but I did just want to say, as I'm listening to this, and also we hosted a dinner last week for 15 CMOs, and it's really important to recognise, I know not a lot of us got into this industry because we were very excited about process and operations, but actually we didn't find it hard to fill that dinner. And I think what's increasingly important is that people really need to not have this as a side of desk project, because it's some of the things we've been discussing with other marketeers is just bringing back some of the joy back into marketing, because it feels very hard. And I think a lot of the answers lie in helping to structure a resilient and strong marketing operating model. So it might not be sexy, but it is sexy when it enables great work, and the work that we all want to do that drives growth for businesses. So key takeaways, I think empower people with the right capabilities and structures, optimize partnerships for value and flexibility, focus on clear and agile processes, and leverage platforms for efficiency and insight. That's a very top line view, but that's just a snapshot of what we take a step back out of the report and see. And then I think on the next chart, Robin, what we see is what AAR really, what we want to do in this area is that we are very focused as a consultancy on solely focused on optimizing operating models. So we want to do our part in helping the industry to really challenge themselves and take on this challenge. And so the way we're going to help is in 3 ways. We want to start conversations, so things like the launch of this research and webinars, so that we can provoke content and also share insight from others who are going through it. We want to give solutions through reports like this one that we're launching, but most importantly, we also want to help drive real change by partnering with marketers to give them hands-on support for how to make transformation happen. But if we took a step back as AAR, this was where we thought what you need to think about, the 5 things we would take out of the report and say are most important to think about. And number 1, it sounds obvious, but it's really important, is that it can't be an afterthought to the strategy. It has to have the same level of attention and focus, because we're seeing it time and again, which is the need to justify your marketing spend is getting harder and harder. And actually, if you can't prove that it's successful and delivering the results to the business, then you're in a tricky position. And so having the right operating model to make sure nothing is hampered or undeliverable is really, really important. And the other thing is that I think because so much noise around this topic, people are moving into doing stuff in lots of disparate places, which is, we have to all tackle things. So I get why we've moved on with dealing with one thing at a time. But the thing that we would advise is that you need to go back to looking at why marketing exists within the organization and how it's linked to the business strategy of your organization. So what business are you in? What is the business impact that you're trying to create? And therefore, what is the role of marketing within that organization? Because that's, if you answer that question, then it becomes a more clear path to therefore what jobs does marketing need to do to enable it to deliver that outcome for the business. And that then helps you with the next question, which is how do you structure, how do you have processes, what skills do you need? So if you go right upstream into where does marketing fit in terms of the business strategy, the flow down of what you do in all of the 4 Ps becomes much more impactful and clear. And then I think it doesn't matter where you start. I think one of the questions I've seen in the Q&A is, where do you start? This seems so impenetrable. But actually, even if you start by thinking about the place that's given you the most pain and the thing that if you fix this year, you'd feel just like so much weight off your shoulder, that's a great place to start. But what you then have to think is, when you start anywhere, it will have an impact elsewhere. It's like dominoes. So you need to start wherever you feel the most pain or where you think you can get the most win in terms of a business case. But then you need to think about how that's impacting the other Ps and the interconnection between them. There is absolutely no doubt in our mind that people are the core of transformation. I just firmly believe that we are fundamentally a talent business. AI will help us, but it won't override people. And if we don't bring them on the journey and help them to get through and build resilience through the changes that we're going to need in this next phase, we're going to really struggle. So help people, like help them with upskilling, help them with having a really clear North Star on where you're going as an organization. It's much easier to accept change if you know that this is painful right now, but think about where it's going to get us in the longer run, what part of the puzzle this fits. And then you help bring people with you. Communicate is, there's never enough communication. And I think where we're seeing organizations really accelerate in this area is they are, instead of dealing with things individually, they're writing quite clear 3-year plans that the board is signing off to about the evolution of their operating model, which means they get dedicated resource, they get buy-in, so that every time you make a change, you're not having to go back up and almost sell it again to everyone in the organization. It's the roadmap is clear, and therefore it doesn't become this side of desk project, which makes it so hard. And what we hear is we're busy enough, and having this on top of our day jobs just makes it all just too hard. So that's really what we would say, the 5 things as you're setting off on this. I mean, I'm sure most of you are set off in some way, but in principle, if you're looking at changing things in the main, and these are good principles to consider. And I think that's then into a section on Q&A. So I was looking, we have got probably, how much time have we got left? We've got just over 15 minutes. And thank you for populating the Q&A. I'm just going to ping you the first question from Rachel Chapman, Robin, which was about saying a bit more about the work that's being done within the marketing operating function, just to hear examples of what they might be doing, so it brings it to life what their sole purpose is.
Okay, great. Well, I'm so glad we have so many questions. It proves that there's somebody out there. We can't see you all, so it just proves that there are real people out there listening.
Not just talking to ourselves, yeah.
Hi, Rachel. The ops function, I think, what it does depends on the maturity, and we're actually working on a maturity model for operations functions. So, as I said before, it can be anything from half a person to, a team of like 10, 15 people. And what they do really depends on the complexity of the organization and the size of the team. It could be something as simple as just, you know, campaign planning process, for example. It could be something as simple as just kind of owning the campaign planning and delivery function. It can be anything from, in a more sophisticated organization, it could be the MarTech stack and dealing with vendors and RFPs and making sure that everything works together. So it really depends on the complexity of the organization. Some of them could have budget. Some of them can hold annual planning. It really depends, but I think it's anything that almost falls under that moniker of the how of marketing. So if it falls into how things get done, then in theory it could be a marketing operations function. I mean, they've got their whole community. They call themselves the MOPS community. They've got their whole community in of themselves. And if we have any marketing operations people on the webinar, I'd love to hear what you specifically do. But it is quite vast.
I think we heard, didn't we, last week, Robin, as well, that everyone approaches marketing with an open mouth and also with a need. So the role of marketing to be able to say no is getting more important, because there's so many asks, and actually sometimes the marketing operating function provides a filter for what is a yes and what is a no, and how to deliver within the budget. So asking questions like, yes, we can do that, but what stops if we do that?
Yeah, and it could also be the center of data, which is, this is the measurement of the work we're doing. So some of the more sophisticated ones have reporting and data as part of them, and are the ones responsible for the the wonderful all-in-one dashboard that some marketeers can live their lives by. It is really, I mean, if I was going to say one thing, it's air traffic control.
Yeah,
in all the senses.
I agree with that. I'm just picking off a slightly different question. What's your best advice to agencies and supporting their clients to best effect during these Wild West times? I can take that one. I'm happy to take that one. I think it's a really important question, and it does feel a bit Wild West, but there is the need is to understand as agencies where you fit into the overall jigsaw puzzle of resources. So with increasing numbers of in-house functions, and just understanding what pressures there are on marketers to answer or sell in a strategy to the board, where do you fit, and how can you play a piece that's really seamless within that, so that you are doing the bit that you are engaged to do brilliantly, but you're playing a generous role that helps to glue more than just that piece together. And playing your role within that, I think, is really key. And we hear loud and clear when partnerships work, it is invaluable to clients to have that outside-in perspective and the ability to take outside-in perspective into the boardroom. So there's still so much value to bring, but I think it's in the context of all the other pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. So you're not too siloed, or you're fitting within what they're needing you to achieve. I'm just looking through Simon Swan. Really great slides. Moving to the marketing operations model, what types of skill sets do you see from marketers looking to embed a marketing operating model? It seems softer skills are becoming important in the need to drive this type of model in-house, as well as being led through firm KPIs.
Yes, is the answer. Yes, softer skills. I would agree with you, Simon. I think that, the shorthand to me is getting people on the bus, and that those needs for stakeholder management, collaboration, are the two things that I see as supremely important in getting your operating model to work efficiently and effectively. Because, as we said, there's so much change at the moment, and your operating model, to me, if you take one thing from this webinar, the reason to build an effective operating model is to build resilience in the system, so that every single wave that comes crashing over the side of the ship, and they're constant at the moment, it just gives you some fortitude and some resilience, and having those softer skills to build the collaboration within the model across your teams, both internal, external, with sales, with IT, with finance, with your agencies, and just making sure that everyone's pulling in the same direction is, to me, the most important skill, and it is one of the softer ones. It's not one that's often taught, but those leadership skills are really more important than ever to kind of quiet down some of the noise and make sure that everyone's focused on the outcomes that you need to be focused on.
Yeah, leadership for me, absolutely vital,
Mm-hmm.
and not just leadership from what we traditionally consider leaders, i.e. the C-suite or the one person at the top. It's leadership within any project or role of influence that you have, taking really making strong actions. And the other thing I would say is creating cultures where people are feeling safe enough to try and try without there being a pointed finger. So try and succeed or try and fail, but we celebrate both, because we have to try new things, can't keep pressing the same buttons and expecting different outcomes. So creating cultures where people feel safe to experiment and innovate and think differently and challenge status quo and push back on ridiculous decisions. So that real leadership quality in the teams is vital.
And I think that also there's another question about change fatigue, and I'm not sure if it's the same question or a different question, but um, we all agree change is constant. So how do you support people? And to Victoria's point of psychological safety, but I think the other thing that I'm finding really does help when it seems really obvious is you can't over communicate as a leader or anyone in the business. This constant change, asking people to kind of take on new roles, shift roles, learn new skills. Leaders and everyone needs to kind of communicate better, and whether that's kind of weekly stand-ups or monthly all hands, or more time in the office together, and that's a whole other debate. But that communication, I think what I find is often when working with leaders is they think the plan is clear and they think they've told people what's happening, but I don't think you can tell people enough, especially with the pace of change, and leave those opportunities for questions and kind of challenge, really. But the pace of change means that I think if you asked most people what they thought they were doing, it would be very different on a given day. So find the right calm style for you and your business and your team, but I don't think you can communicate enough about what's happening these days. People are often in the dark and then afraid to ask and feeling alone and isolated because they don't know what's change they're actually trying to affect that week or that day.
We're going to struggle to answer all the questions, but I would really encourage anyone we don't get to individually, please get in touch. We're happy to have one-on-ones with you. But Amy, your question around, do you think creative operations, which is becoming more prominent, sit within marketing operations or within the brand marketing, as is often the case?
Again, it depends on the structure of the team. I would argue that brand marketing is marketing. So, different organizations have different definitions of what marketing covers. And, sadly, I guess lots of organizations think of marketing as the advertising department, which is unfair, I would say, in the most part. So, creative operations is the heart of how shit gets done, essentially. So, yes, I agree that, a creative operations function, often we see them most in in-house teams. And depending on the complexity and the size of the in-house team, we always find that those that are thriving have given a real thoughtfulness to their kind of op model and their operations. Those that are struggling often have brilliant teams of doers, but might not have one or two people dedicated to the operations of that team, and that makes a huge difference. Once you get the creative ops people in to kind of air traffic control, even within the in-house agency, it makes a massive difference to the success of that function.
Thanks, Robin. were there any pertinent differences in the research between B2B and B2C findings? We did interview B2B clients as well as B2C clients, and the overall findings weren't necessarily different, but what we find is every organization, culture, what the role of marketing is within that organization, what jobs marketing has to do in that organization is vastly different. So that's why there's no silver bullet. But I would say Antonia Wade, who's the CMO, global CMO of PwC, was one of the interviewees, and it's well worth reading the report. But I think a lot of what came out in the B2B space was even more complexity on stakeholder management, but still the same needs across the 4 Ps, but with just different marketing jobs to be done because of the B2B environment. But yeah, I'd encourage you to have a read of the report, because there's lots of quotes from Antonia in there about the B2B environment. Just looking through, what conscious of time. What shifts are you seeing in how brands manage agency and partner ecosystems? Are marketers moving more towards consolidation, orchestration, or something else entirely? Do you want to take this, Robin?
Sure, yeah. I think it varies by sector and complexity of the existing ecosystem. So regardless of what model I guess they're moving to, our point of view is that client is band leader or conductor. So no matter whether they are separate or they're moving to more integration or they've got an in-house lead, I think it's the client's responsibility to be the overall leader of no matter what model. And I guess the model should be thoughtful, I guess. We work with so many clients where I always use the analogy of you just build more and more extensions onto your beautiful property, and there's a bit over here and a bit over there, and they're not always connected. So I think it's incumbent on the brand and the marketing team to look at their needs holistically and design an operating model for their agencies that fits their business requirements. What doesn't work is when everyone goes off and finds their own agencies in their own little silos and does what they want to do. And it's all fine if somebody else wants to change, but I've got it all working fine. But when we then go in and look at it holistically, you find you've got a lot of duplication and some meaningful gaps, and you might not be using the right agency for the right requirement. And there are always both efficiencies from a cost point of view to look at and effectiveness gains as well. So looking at it and thinking about it as its own little operating model is probably the advice I would give. I don't know, Vic, if you have something to add.
No, I'd agree with that. And I would add also that there's a need for marketers to be better at clearly briefing their partners and giving some better briefing, because then there's so many opportunities in all of this, which is the exciting part, to not have to buy things cheaper, which is really a danger to the whole agency marketplace, which is procurement thinking they need to buy cheaper. Of course, that's the one way to drive efficiencies, but actually there's so much fat in the system in terms of processing, getting things right first time, being better at briefing, that are far more beneficial to both agencies and marketeers to get that right. You can drive real efficiency without actually having to just use a stick to cut down rates and hours and move away from this time-based model of remuneration. And so there's a lot of work to be done, I think, around just really thoughtfully, I think that's a good word, Robin, thoughtfully designing your agency model, but then also thinking about how to drive the most effectiveness from it, better briefing, remuneration models, being better partners both ways. So that's what I would say is going on in that space. We're really running out of time, so I'm not going to get to all of the questions. I encourage you to download the report, which is the QR code here. If you want to download the report, you can have a proper read with a cup of tea. It's long, but it's purposefully long. It's detailed and it's really useful. And if you have questions, then feel free to get in touch with any of us. And there's a lot of work we're doing across all of the 4 Ps. This is the type of work we're consulting on across all the areas, and we'd love to help. We really believe that by fixing the operating model. We're going to help marketing to find its rightful place at the top table in the boardroom, because it has lost a bit of footing. And I think part of that is that marketeers need to be as strong strategically as they are commercially. But now there's a third leg to that stool. They need to be as strong strategically, commercially, and operationally. And we want to help them win in that battle. So thank you for your time today. I hope you got a lot out of it. If you didn't get your questions answered, just get in touch. We're a friendly, helpful bunch, and I really appreciate your time.